Whenever you rent or buy a video, you need to be sure that the film you choose is suitable for the audience at home.
Do sit down. We're just about to have some tea.
Ladies and gentlemen, please do not panic, but scream! Scream for your lives!
Hail weirdos, the kettle's boiled. Welcome to Tea for Terror, where we take a favourite horror film and dissect it over a nice Christmas cuppa. I'm your host, Andrew Graves, and my guest today is here to tell us that no one dressed as Santa Claus is safe. How you doing, mate? How you doing?
Andrew, I'm good. I have survived another screening of the bonkers film we're going to discuss today.
Yeah, I should point out it's Dan Taylor, by the way. I don't think I got your name.
That's okay.
Sorry, I'm a bit all over the place today. Yeah, it's Dan Taylor, who if you listen to this podcast, you will know that Dan's already been on twice. We had a really good talk about, first time he was on, we had a really good talk about exploitation cinema and Reanimator. So it's really good to get him. But what did you talk about last time?
Last time we talked about
it's childhood nightmares, childhood trauma, wasn't it? Yeah. Yes, Wurzel Gummidge and all that.
Yes.
Yeah. So it's always good to get you on, my stateside chum. So yeah, and obviously Dan's kind of best known for exploitation retrospect and doing this kind of and what's the other one you do? The
Hungover Gourmet.
Hungover Gourmet. Yes.
Our latest issue came out earlier this year, and we have a new issue in the works for spring of 2025. So we're back at it.
Fantastic.
Yeah.
So what have you been up to?
Just getting ready for the holidays. I'm trying to make sure that I don't open any packages that are marked "Don't open till Christmas." Making sure I don't dress as Santa Claus and go wandering the streets of Baltimore, Maryland, because as we all know, that's kind of it's not safe. It's not safe.
Probably all right over there. I'm not sure about over here. It's distinctly dodgy territory for
I had to shut down my roadside chestnut stand just because you never know. You never know.
Okay, that or I mean, obviously we'll get to it. I'm not going to give it away, but Jesus, there's a scene in that film. It's like that never fucking happens in this country. We don't have, that's fucking bullshit. Yeah. So yeah. So Christmas. So what is there anything you particularly have you got any like other than the obvious stuff? But have you got any like things that you do in your family or whatever?
Oh yeah.
What do you have to uphold for Christmas?
Well, so my wife and I, we both grew up outside of Philadelphia, and there's a department store in Philadelphia where they do it's a walk through Dickens Village, and it's a walk through Christmas Carol, and they have like all these animatronics and displays that tell the story of a Christmas Carol, and there's also a light show that's narrated by Julie Andrews. And so they have this giant light show, and it's very low rent. It's kind of dodgy, as you might say. And but we go up every year. We don't live outside Philadelphia anymore. We live outside Baltimore, Maryland. So we're about an hour and a half away. But our family tradition is we go up every year and do the walk through Dickens Village, and take the family photo. Our daughter is 17 this year, so she's going off to college next year. So we've told her that she has to do the Santa Claus photo this year. She can't just do the family photo. She has to have her photo taken with Santa Claus. So yeah, that's like our big holiday tradition. And then my nephew, his birthday is Christmas Eve, and so he's 26 now. But we have our big family thing is Christmas Eve. Christmas Day is kind of chill and relaxed. But we do my father-in-law and I cook a big dinner with a whole beef fillet that's been stuffed with cheese and, all sorts of delicious food. So yeah, so that's kind of our family tradition. How about you?
Well, just picking up on your Dickensian thing there. See, we don't need a Dickensian kind of theme park, whatever, over here, because I live in Nottingham, so it's pretty Dickensian all year round. Child poverty, prostitution, all this kind of stuff, freezing cold weather. So yeah, we pretty much live the Dickens experience. No, actually, talking about Dickens, one of the things tend to do, usually starting around November and like leading up to Christmas, is I mean, over here, not so much now. You get the odd bits and pieces, but for years, you kind of in that pre-Christmas build-up, you tended to get on Sunday nights, you get like a BBC Dickens adaptation. So there's
Mhm.
been loads and loads of them over the years, and I've got loads of box sets and DVDs. So I kind of like watching the Dickens stuff, and kind of I like the sort of 70s, 80s ones. I mean, there's been some good sort of modern ones.
Mhm.
Guy Pearce was in a really good.
Yep.
I don't know if you know Peaky Blinders over
Yeah,
here, but
sure.
yeah, the
Yeah.
guy who writes Peaky Blinders, he wrote a really good adaptation of Christmas Carol, like
Mhm.
a new with Guy Pearce. That's pretty good. But I kind of like those kind of 70s, 80s versions. There's something about that kind of cheapness and the fact that, you've got some of it on film, the interior shots are all on video, and it's kind of like the way that those cheap video shots, the way that you have candles and they kind of pull the light across the screen. I kind of like that. So, yeah, I tend to watch a lot of Dickens leading up to Christmas, and then going as we get closer to Christmas, tend to watch. And again, I don't know whether these have ever hit the States or whatever, but we in the and there's modern versions of them now by Mark Gatiss, but in the 70s there was this run of M.R. James adaptations on the BBC called A Ghost Story for Christmas. So they do a new
Mhm.
one every Christmas.
Oh.
And the ones directed by Lawrence Gordon Clark are just absolutely brilliant. And the new one's pretty good by Mark Gatiss. But yeah, those classic ones, starting with, there was one way back before that they did Jonathan Miller. He did in 1968, he did a version of Whistle and I'll Come to You in black and white, which, if you've never seen,
Mhm.
and this is to everybody, not just you, Dan. If you've never seen it, you need to go out and watch it, preferably this Christmas. But it's one of the weirdest, most genuinely terrifying things you'll ever see. It's black and white, but it's so odd in it's the one of the closest things you can imagine to being a real nightmare. It's
Hmm.
brilliant. It's really good, and it's only about half an hour long.
Oh,
But
okay.
yeah, all of those things. Yeah, they're kind of my Christmas tradition. Just watching telly.
Mhm.
I ain't got any kids, so kind of Christmas kind of lost its meaning around
Right.
about when I was 12.
Uh,
But I do like Christmas, but it's kind of not the same because I've not got any kids or any younger relatives really. So we normally have the family over for Boxing Day, but did you have Boxing Day in
no.
America? Like, Boxing Day is kind of like the day after
Day
Christmas.
after Christmas. Okay. Right.
Yeah, I think the tradition of it goes way back, but it was basically where your serfs or your lower orders would get tips from the sort of richer people in town.
Mhm.
So it's like you went around with your box, and that's why it's called Boxing Day.
Oh, okay.
So I don't do that. Well, I might be doing next year. I don't know.
I
See
was
how
gonna
things
say,
go.
depends on how
Yeah,
2025 goes.
yeah. But no, I don't know. I've just rambled on for fucking ages saying absolutely nothing. So
Ah,
not a lot at Christmas. I do like Christmas though. I like, you know what? What I really love about Christmas, I like the build up. I like Christmas Eve.
yeah.
Christmas Day is a bit of a no-hour, to be honest. I like the period in between Christmas and New Year.
Mm.
It's kind of like you forget what day it is. You don't quite know where you are.
Right.
Nobody's doing anything particularly interesting, and it's just like you're floating around. It's a really nice, underrated time of the year, I think.
Yes, I totally agree. I totally agree.
Hmm. Anyway, so,
Let's get to it.
yeah, that's okay. So, well, hang on, but before we get to it, then, um, obviously it's our Christmas episode, so we're gonna look at last year. with James Whittington, we looked at Black Christmas, which is an absolute classic. And this year we are going to look at another Christmas film. But before we get to that, what are there any? Because there are quite, it is quite of a subgenre in itself now. Over the years, it's built up. So, are there any other than the one we're going to look at today? Are there any sort of Christmas horror films or horror adjacent films you would kind of dig out this time of year, or you have a particular fondness for?
Yeah, and it's funny because I was thinking about this, you know, now the Christmas horror genre is so big. Like you can't swing a dead cat without hitting, some sort of Christmas adjacent horror film. You have
Mm.
you have anthology films, you've got the various Krampus films and all of these different things. For me, the one that probably holds the nearest and dearest to my heart is the original Silent Night, Deadly Night. And the reason is that that was where I met a guy named Lou Gonzi, who was my best friend. And he was the guy who I co-founded Exploitation Retrospect with. And we lived in the same town, but had never met. We had mutual friends, had never met, had heard about each other. And he was home from college over Thanksgiving break in 1984 when Silent Night, Deadly Night came out and was in the theaters. And so a group of us got together, and I finally met him that night. We hit it off spectacularly. Same sense of humor, same love of films, and just became best buddies. And so for me, Silent Night, Deadly Night always brings back that memory of meeting Lou for the first time, and then just all the crazy escapades and antics we had over the years. Unfortunately, Lou passed away a few years ago, so it really holds a special place in my heart because it takes me back to that time in my life.
I mean, like you said, I mean, there is kind of a plethora now. I mean, a lot of it. You've got to sift through it. There's a lot of
Oh
trash,
yeah.
in this, in the same way that the Christmas movie as a broader thing, you know, if you look at some of your cheaper streaming channels or whatever, or some of your cheaper sort of satellite channels or whatever, from sort of October onwards, they're just peddling this made for TV or straight to video shite. So there's a lot of stuff, and it's similar with the horror stuff. But there are some absolute quality films. A couple that I have watched sort of more religiously over the last few years is there's a film called Rare Exports. I don't know if you're aware of Rare Exports. Absolutely, it is. I wouldn't describe it as out and out horror. It's more dark fantasy, but it's really good, and it's a really interesting take on it. And the other one I think you kind of mentioned there was Krampus. The I think that is a really it's kind of got Gremlins overtones, and it's Gremlins itself is a Christmas movie, Christmas horror movie, but yeah, I really like that because I know that one of the reasons, I mean, it's a great cast. I think it's a really good cast. It's a good premise. It looks really good, and it looks really good because there is CG in it, but it's not like many other films, it's not an over reliance on CG. They use a lot of practical effects and puppetry, and it looks fucking mint. It looks really good, and it's got a wicked sense of humor. And the opening scene is fantastic, and it's kind of like a really cynical telling of Christmas. The opening scene is where it's basically done in slow-mo. It's kind of in a shopping mall or whatever, and it's over the top of the this kind of slow-mo scene. You've got, it's beginning to look a lot like Christmas singing, and it's kind of lovely and nice. And then the whole scene just turns into this kind of slow motion riot, and people are fighting, and it's brilliant. It's really, really well done. And the other thing I like, this is really odd and very strange. And someone pointed this out to me the other year because I completely missed it. In the trailer of Krampus, for some reason, I have absolutely no, because this is an American production. If you look at the trailer very, very closely, they cut to a lot of like outdoor, real like stock footage outside Christmas scenes. there's a tiny blink and you'll miss it. They show you Nottingham, Nottingham Market Square at the beginning in the Krampus trailer. It's like, and someone told me this. I was like, no. And I went back and it's fucking hell, it is. It's what, why is Nottingham in Krampus? It's really weird. So yeah,
Huh.
yeah, strange fact, kids. Yeah.
Yeah, I haven't seen Krampus in ages, but I've never seen Rare Exports. It's actually on my list for this.
Ah, I really recommend it. It's fantastic. Rare exports, yeah, it's really, really good. And it's yeah, it's just different kind of foreign language film, but it's got a different kind of feel. Very, very sort of, if it's just got a weird vibe and it's got a really original, disturbing sort of premise and setup, and it kind of ends on a sort of happy note, but it's still fairly disturbing. It's it's great though. It's really good. I really, really recommend it.
All right, great. I'm gonna
Yeah.
get to it this weekend.
Yeah, you should. You should definitely. So, I guess we'll go into the film we're going to look at today is, of course, Don't Open Till Christmas from 1984, directed by Edmund Purdom. Or was it?
A homicidal maniac is loose at Christmas. His target is Santa Claus. No one dressed as Santa Claus is safe. His death toys are a spear, a gun, an open razor, a dagger, or a garrote. Execution by any means. Don't open till Christmas.
So, Dan, when was the first time you came across this masterpiece of a
Uh,
film?
it's odd because it flew under my radar for a long time. And I have a buddy, Bruce Holichek, who does the Cinema Arcana, and he does a lot of commentary tracks on exploitation Blu-ray releases and things like that. And Bruce and I are good buddies, and we have traveled to film festivals and horror-thons and things like that. And he knew of my love for pieces because how do you not love pieces? And he mentioned Don't Open Till Christmas one time, and I was like, oh, I'm not familiar with that. So luckily, the Mondo Macabro DVD, I think, had just come out. And I've had the opportunity to see it on the big screen as well in recent years. But I've worn out that Mondo Macabro DVD over the years. So it's probably, I'd say probably like 10 years ago was the first time that I saw it. And it just, the sleaze factor, the oddness of it, everything about it, just because it's kind of a slasher, it's kind of a giallo, it's kind of just a sleazy movie. So yeah, it was right in my wheelhouse.
Yeah, it's kind of a mess. Yeah, I don't just mean, I mean in terms of the production, which we'll get on to. I mean, like, Jesus. Yeah, to be, I do remember seeing this quite a while ago, and I'd kind of forgotten other than the obvious, I'd kind of forgotten what happened. So it was kind of nice to revisit it again when you suggested let's do this. Um, it's, I mean, in terms of how you view it, because this is like there's like none more English than this film, and I wonder, I mean, how do you view it as someone from the States? Because I think I view this film, possibly view this film slightly differently, just because it's my home country and I know the kind of idiosyncrasies and I know the 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 appealing nature of that kind of tackiness of this kind of film and the country it was kind of spilling out from at the time. But I mean, do you just watch it as a slasher? Does it feel particularly English to you, or how do you view it?
I mean, it does feel particularly English to me, just because the setting of it, for one thing. You have kind of, you've got Scotland Yard, you've got the Christmas market scene, you have the bizarro torture dungeon that the Santa Claus stumbles into. It just, yeah, it feels very British to me. Um, but I do love it just because it's such a bonkers slasher slash giallo, whatever you want to call it. You know, it lurches from plot point to plot point, but I'm never bored by it because it's just, even watching it the other day in preparation for the podcast, it was like, oh right, that happens. Like, you forget some of the things that take place in the movie, and then something happens, and you're just like, I totally forgot that that happened in this movie. So no matter how many times I've seen it, it never fails to tickle me.
Well, I mean, there's a number of things I think with this. It's like if in, I think the British film industry around that time. So even though you'd had some of the, around that time you'd had, you kind of Oscar winning for, Chariots of Fire. So in some ways, you know, British cinema was seen as being kind of on the up and up again, even though financially it wasn't doing that well. Um, and it kind of um so there was that, but at the same time, you got quite a lot of guff pouring out of the British film industry. So you had things that, is entertaining. I'm not saying it's crap, but, in terms of like, so you'd had, even though you got things like, your more your Chariots of Fire kind of Oscar winning kind of highfalutin stuff, and then you'd had really interesting stuff like at the beginning of the 80s, like in 1980, you'd had things like Long Good Friday, which is fantastic, and but then you'd also get this kind of from the late 70s up until you sort of early 80s, you were getting this kind of more throwaway kind of guff, which was entertaining in one sense, but absolute shite. And you got things like the Stored and the Bitch and Who Dares Wins and all this kind of stuff. All this kind of so this kind of feels like it feels in that kind of area, and I think it because it is so. I mean, the thing about it is, if I think in America, with a lot of, as an outsider, if you look at a lot of American Christmas films, whether they're horror films or not, from my point of view, always look, even something like where, say, National Lampoon's Christmas Vacation, you've got Griswold and this kind of disaster of a Christmas holiday. And yeah, all around me growing up in a little shitty mining town in England, I was just looking at their house and thinking, that's fucking incredible. Who lives in a house like that? It's brilliant. And so I think there is all this, and even if you watch something like Scrooged or whatever, it's always about this kind of, Christmas in America is always presented to us as being this absolutely impossibly vibrant, lush, incredible event, and it's not. And even though they in this country, if you see like your John Lewis adverts or your Marks and Spencer adverts, all these kind of adverts, trying to convince you that everybody's having these kind of banquets and their houses are immaculately decorated. The reality is, for most people in this country, particularly in the 70s and 80s, this kind of period the film came out, um, you know, in some ways, if Christmas wasn't really tacky, you weren't really doing it properly. And I
Mm.
think what's I just love how fucking awful this film looks. Christmas looks terrible, and it's
Yeah.
a really good, realistic depiction of what Christmas was mostly for people. I'm not saying people didn't have a good time at Christmas, but if you go into the flat, the main character, the woman's flat, the Christmas decorations in there, they're fucking piss poor.
Yeah, yeah, and like she's just got like a garland is just like pinned to the wall and like hanging down. Like, what kind of decoration is that?
This and
And
every single Santa, just fucking they look terrible.
terrible, terrible. But you have to explain something to me. And I like the party at the beginning of the movie where the dad gets killed. Like, uh,
I don't know
is
what's
that is
going on.
that no
Don't ask
like
me.
is that like a traditional English like
No, 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 no,
okay.
no. I mean, the way that the Santa looks. I mean, you tended to, I don't know. I mean, you tended to get uh I don't know if it's still. I don't. I work for myself, so I don't. I don't have a Christmas party. But I think in a lot of places, there was usually that thing where the boss would dress up as
Right.
Santa and give out, you know, shit presents rather than actually
Mm.
paying you fairly. But you say you have all that kind of thing. I wouldn't say it was necessarily a tradition. It was just, sometimes you tended to get that. But yeah, Christmas is I think it's got better, but for most people it's kind of a slightly tacky affair.
Mm.
Christmas trees. Where you can get. I mean, on my street, I've got a guy vendor who that they're selling like proper Christmas trees and things like that. So, but a lot of the time, it's very sort of cheap tinsel, and when I was growing up in the 70s and 80s, you used to buy like Christmas cards in packs of 50 or 100 or
Mm.
something, and they'd be just so cheap that you'd put them on the shelf and they'd just splay out because they couldn't
Mhm.
they couldn't stand up
Stand
under their
up,
own
right.
weight. So there's a lot of this shit. And I don't think I think I there's a big thing made of like Christmas dinner because where I know like a lot of people in America have Christmas dinner on a sort of Christmas Eve.
Mhm.
It's always a Christmas Day thing, mid-afternoon, Christmas Day. Some people watch the King's Speech or whatever, all that kind of shite. But yeah, it's there is an overwhelming feeling of tackiness. It's shit tinsel. It's Brussels sprouts. It's your granny farting away till Boxing Day. All this kind of stuff. But it's kind of it's great. It's nice, But it's like, if you want to know Christmas, like classic Christmas in this, it is one of the biggest selling Christmas singles in our country. It's kind of played every year. Is Slade's "I Wish It,"
Oh,
it's
yeah.
Christmas, everybody, and
Right.
that's
Right.
it's Slade is kind of, even though it's a very obviously that's 50 odd years old now, but that is still the embodiment of the British Christmas. I think it's all of that kind of stuff. There's nothing really, even though people pretend otherwise. I think the typical British Christmas is it's there's nothing sort of Victorian about it. This idea that it's all lavish gold, and it's not. It's much
Mhm.
much tackier than that. But it's good fun.
Mhm.
You know,
Yeah. Uh, I enjoy Christmas. I enjoy, the Christmas decorations but yeah, the decorations in Dodo Patil Christmas do make it look like a dreadful holiday
that's probably the truest thing about the film
of
is
the
the way
movie.
it looks. Yeah. Yeah, yeah, yeah. Well, because I think they did actually start. They initially started filming around Christmas time, didn't they? They started filming in December, I think, but then there was like a gap of so many months, and then they didn't actually finish it till the sort of the following year. And
Right.
I think they went through numerous changes, didn't? So you got Edmund Purdom, he's the director, and he also plays the inspector, but I think he got hacked off with the whole thing fairly soon, and he nicked off. Then they replaced him with Derek Ford. We'll talk about Derek Ford in a minute. But Derek
Mm.
Ford, and I think Derek Ford lasted as director for about 2 days. Derek Ford sort of
Right. Yeah.
co-produced it and wrote it and stuff as well, or co-wrote it, I think.
Right.
And then you ended up with Ray Selfie, who was the editor, and he came in to finish off the directing duties. And then Edmund Purdom came back, and then they'd filmed so much, and then because there was such a gap, they thought they weren't going to get the same actors back, and
Right.
so they'd recast Edmund Purdom's part, and I think another couple of people, and then Edmund Purdom came back. Oh, it is, I don't. It's kind of like you imagine, obviously, I've just, another kind of Christmas film. I've just read a book called The Making of the Wizard of Oz, which is, if you've not read that, it's a fantastic read, really interesting. But again, it shows you just how complicated productions can be and cast changes. There was 10 different writers on Wizard of Oz. There was four different directors.
Hmm.
It's a miracle that that film got made. But, at the end of the day, we get the Wizard of Oz. Similar with Apocalypse Now, we got Apocalypse Now, you know, all of this hassle with this film, and we got Don't Open Till
Right.
Christmas.
We did not get Apocalypse Now. Yeah, it's so bizarre because I was telling one of my buddies about it this morning, trying to explain Don't Open Till Christmas. And, you know, like the whole like at some point you're like, well, is he trying to establish like a romantic relationship with Kate? And then you're like, well, does Kate think that he's the killer? Because at a certain point, they're trying to make you think that Edmund Purdom's the killer when you know darn well he's not the killer. And then Kate doesn't think he's the killer. And we definitely know who the killer is because it's the worst red herring, in cinema history, Giles from the Daily News. Um, yeah, it's so all over the place and trying to keep up with who is doing what, and what's up with the boyfriend, Cliff Boyd, your cheeky young street musician.
I don't know. There's so many little, they go on so many little avenues, and you think, what the fuck is this about?
Well,
Again,
and
it's a very good reflection of where we were in terms of Britain as a culture. For all the highfalutin stuff, this is much more, whatever you think about the film, this is much more an accurate representation of where we were and the mindset. I love that. I love Giles. I'm a reporter for who? The Daily News.
Daily
Daily
News,
News. I
Giles
mean,
Daily News.
you could what you don't want to rewrite that. You don't want to come with something better. This placeholder text, the Daily News.
Cliff and Kate always looked to me like they wandered off the set of a Naked Eyes music video. Like, like we were shooting that on the next lot, and Cliff and Kate, and they're just playing the same characters that they were playing in the Naked Eyes video. And Edmund Purdom, I mean, he delights me. Like he just, as I explained, I said to one of my friends the other day, I said he looks like whiskey and cigarettes had a baby. You know?
Well, that's the thing. It's like, even in this country now, there are, rightly or wrongly, there are certain standards. Most actors go to the gym. Most actors look after themselves. Not not in this country, not in the 70s and 80s. I mean, this is that you can smell the fucking sweat. You can
Oh,
see the clogged pores. You can hear the wheezing. It's just everybody smoking, eating shit, not going to the gym and
right.
drinking like fuck. That's what it was. Christmas especially, fucking hell. I mean, my dad's no longer with us, bless him, but he he would never have seen himself as an alcoholic because you that's just what you did in the 70s and 80s. You just drank. My dad convinced himself that he wasn't a, he didn't have a drinking problem because he would never have drink in the house. But he was never in the house. It's always out. He was in, I think he had 2 nights in where he stayed in, and that was it. And the rest of the time he was at the working man's club getting pissed. And he was just a fairly jovial drunk. He wasn't like causing problems, but it was just that's the culture in our country. I mean, I don't drink now, but we have such an unhealthy relationship with alcohol in this country. It's kind of amusing in some ways, but it's just like you can't not drink. I just I don't mind other people drinking and I don't mind pubs, but I don't go out now because there's such a pressure on you to drink.
Mm.
You can't not drink. It's so socially unacceptable not to drink. But and at Christmas, it's like hyped up to a million degrees. It's just you've got to drink, you've got to get fucked.
Mm.
Yeah,
Yeah,
it's strange.
yeah. Well, here I think I've mentioned this before. Like I'm a movie fan, but I'm also a sports fan. So, I love football, I love hockey. Um, and here it's like if it's not an ad for beer or some sort of alcohol, it's an ad for gambling. Like uh, gambling has become such a huge thing here now. It used to be that you could bet in Las Vegas, Nevada, and you could bet in Atlantic City, New Jersey, and that was it. And now that they've legalized gambling, you can do it on your phone. I don't know what it's like over in England,
Most
but you can just pick up your phone and place a bet on not just the next game, but you can make a bet on the next play. And so, like, gambling and alcohol have become such a huge thing here in the States. I mean, alcohol was always a huge thing in the States, but like are those vices have become so predominant in terms of the advertising that you see that, yeah, I mean, it's kind of interesting that we've gotten to this point.
well, it's just the amount of hypocrisy. I mean, the gambling thing, it's a very similar story in this country. And they've tried to introduce various forms of legislation, not particularly successfully. But the thing now is, in all gambling ads, there's this thing at the end of the ads where it's like, make sure you gamble responsibly. It's like, what the fuck are you talking about? If you've got a problem with, it's like say, and it's similar with the alcohol, drink responsibly. Oh, I'm sure the guy buying this fucking bottle of whiskey is going to drink responsibly. What the fuck are you talking about? It's just madness.
Amidst the wax and plaster, a real body, warm flesh, wet blood.
So, obviously we touched upon plot and stuff like that. So, I mean, yeah. I mean, you said it there. It's like, what, what's going on? It's like, because I think it probably depends on which scene you're viewing at a time, because I honestly think that obviously, like most films, you have a script and you film a bit and then you film this bit on this day and you might not film it in order and all this kind of stuff. It's very rare that you film things in, chronological order. But I think given the nature of the script changes and given the nature of the fact that um the director was changed and then changed again and then brought back in the original director brought back in and there was, various changes and there was possible talk about changing actors. I think that obviously we see the finished thing, and I think that depending on which scene you're viewing, that scene might have been filmed with this particular thing in mind, that this was going to happen in the rest of the film, and then maybe another scene you watch a few scenes later that the intention was this instead. So if that's what it feels like to me, because it just feels very confused and very, it's entertaining and it's not particularly complicated, but you can see that there are all sorts of little threads that they start to pull and then just let go and don't bother exploring that any further. So I think that what happens at the end is it feels like that was thought about later on, maybe. I don't know, I could be wrong.
Yeah, and that's the interesting thing. I mean, first of all, based on the history of the film, the fact that it's watchable at all is almost a Christmas miracle, because you have so much stuff going on. You have all of these characters, that you keep thinking at some point, well, of course, these two characters are going to interact with one another. No, they don't. No, like that never happens. And like you said, at one point, you feel like is the inspector being painted as the murderer? Like, was the original intention that he was going to end up being the killer, or was Giles the killer all along? Spoiler alert. But you'll know it the second that you see Giles from the Daily News. Um, and from what I've read, apparently the ending that we get, as bizarre as it is, was the original ending,
Yeah,
which I don't quite understand, because it seems like something they came up with on the spot that day, and they were like, "All right, we got to wrap this up. Edmund's got to get out of here." he's got whiskey to drink and cigarettes to smoke. We got to get this done. And then and like I remember the first time seeing it, and the ending happens, and you're like, wait, what? What are did I did I miss something here?
I was going to say, I I don't, particularly from that period, I don't mind. I'm not a kind of, oh, those effects are really bad. I'm honestly on if the ideas are there, but the explosion in it is so bad and so pathetic. It's like
It's
it's
so
not even
pathetic.
touched him. It's
And
not
then like
touched him.
the side of his face is all like if you look closely, like the side of his face on the one side, but they don't even get a good shot of it. Like the camera's
No.
on the other side of where he is. The explosion happens. Yeah. What one of the things that impresses me the most is that the killer is so adept at so many different types of weaponry and there's knives, there's guns. He electrocutes one of the guys. Um, there's he whacks off one of Santa's little elves in the bathroom with a straight razor. He's really adept at at killing. He's a relentless killing machine.
He's thought about this, hasn't he?
He's really given it a lot of
He's
thought.
thought about it way more than the scriptwriter did. Um, it's-
And like the and I don't know if you agree with me, the actress who I think is actually the best is the one who plays the girl in the Peep Show.
oh yeah, 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 yeah,
Yeah.
yeah,
Like
yeah.
she's like I'm like watching it the other day. I was like, she's actually given a pretty good performance. I mean, she wears the same shirt throughout the entire movie, which I don't understand. Like, did they shoot all of her scenes in one day, even though they're supposed to take place over like a week?
Probably one
Probably.
afternoon, to be
And
honest.
I mean, she barely even gets a credit. Like her credit in the movie is something like experienced girl or something like that. Like her name's it's Sherry Graham, I think is her character's name. But yeah, she's really good. Um, but yeah, it's just it's such a everybody seems to be acting in their own movie. Like they don't seem to be acting in the same film, and some of the people seem to be acting in two different films. And they just stitched it all together.
Well, yeah, because his mate who comes along towards the beginning of the film, and the other thing is, it's like I tell you, why is he busking? What's that about? Like the most
Yeah.
unrealistic busker in the world, as if he's going to be a busker, as if he can play the fucking flute. Why is he doing? How it? It's
Yeah, I
it's the best thing about this film. Well, there's a few good things. I like it. There's a lot of stuff I like about it. But the best thing is it's in the same vein, though it's not as good a film as something like Dracula AD 72. It's this this brilliant, this idea of middle-aged men thinking they understand young people's culture and they don't get it at all. And it's like it's just fantastic. So what is this? How you think the young hip kids lead their
young
life
right, young
playing
hip.
flute in the middle of
Yes.
London?
Yes, he's busking and then he's going and they're going over to the flat of his pornographer friend, Jerry, the pornographer friend.
Yeah, he's on some register now, I can guarantee.
Right. Yeah. And then like we don't know that like did Cliff have sex with the girl before they go out onto the street and she's in the Santa outfit?
Well,
And
I
they
I I wouldn't. Again, I could be. There's no way of knowing, but I wonder whether th that those scenes where with his pornographer friend, who went on to be, he was one of the main stars in a long-running cop show over here called The Bill. So he was in that. So he's most a lot of
awesome.
he's like basically like a cop soap opera thing that went on for years. But he was in that. But it's the weird thing is it's like I would hesitate to guess that When Derek Ford was directing, I would guess that he directed those scenes because
Mm-hmm.
that's where. I mean, I don't know if you know much about Derek Ford.
Hmm.
Derek Ford, okay. So Derek Ford he was basically that character in reality. He made a lot of kind of sexploitation films. And he did these kind of crossovers into horror as well, horror sort of porno sort of. But yeah, Derek Ford was very much known for his kind of sleazy sexploitation, and I think that I wonder if that was his influence,
His
those
contribution.
themes,
Yeah,
because
yeah,
it doesn't
yeah,
really go anywhere. It doesn't. There's no sort of payoff to it.
yeah. No.
It's just like okay, we need an excuse for some lass to get in her underwear in this scene. That's
Right.
it. That's
Right.
that's it.
Yep.
So that's what you get, and that feels very Derek Ford to me. But yeah, I mean, it just there is there's no. It doesn't feel like because, as we say, the nature of the production, it clearly has no. There's no vision there, is there? I don't even want to use the word vision on
And
something
Vision
like
seems, yeah, that seems like a giving him too much credit. And we haven't even touched upon the Carolyn Monroe scene.
well, well, yeah. Um, yeah, I don't. Again, the other connection is, Dracula 72 AD. So, but yeah, she did have it. And she's also in Maniac as well, the original Maniac. And so she did pop up in these things as well as kind of James Bond and other stuff. But yeah, I do like Carolyn Monroe.
Oh yeah.
She looks great, and she's always seems like she's always game for whatever it is. But yeah, it's that again. That's confusing. What is it? Is it a video shoot? Is it meant to be a gig? I don't know what it is. What's
Yeah,
happening?
I've always assumed it's supposed to be a concert, but I don't know why Carolyn Monroe is doing a concert in London at Christmas time, but good for her, you know.
And again, that kind of reeks of we've blagged Carolyn Monroe. Oh, brilliant! Yeah, but she's only
Right.
available for one afternoon. Oh, right.
Right. Well,
Okay, we'll do this
and
then.
she, and she's also so Dick Randall produced this and Pieces, and it's Slaughter High
Yeah,
is
yeah,
the other
yeah.
one. And she's also in that, right? So I mean, I guess there's the Dick Randall knew Carolyn Monroe, and he was like, "Hey, I can get Carolyn Monroe for a day. Let's put her in the movie because she's a bigger name than Edmund Purdom."
Well, I mean, he had, fair, I'm not saying he's a household name or anything like that, but he had quite a long career, and he was doing stuff from quite a long,
Right.
he was kind of an English actor who was kind of on the scene and doing stuff for a number of years. So I don't know whether he was kind of just down on the bones of his arse when he did this. I don't know, but it doesn't feel like he was particularly on board. Obviously, he wasn't. He wasn't on board for quite a lot, a lot of months. So yeah, I mean, um, I think that the one of the film's strengths is that it is, there's lots of talk about, films being, like Home Alone is a classic example of they've made this film and then the Christmas thing almost becomes an afterthought, and now it's only seen as a Christmas film, even though the Christmas stuff was kind of tagged on. But this film can only be. I would argue, if you're watching this in July, there's something fucking wrong with
I was just going to say the same thing.
you.
Right, right. Because the conversation my buddy and I had today, we were discussing Die Hard. Is Die Hard a Christmas movie? And I said, for me, Die Hard's a movie. Like I originally saw it in the theater in
Yeah,
June,
yeah, yeah,
and
yeah,
we watch it at Christmas time, but I'm just as apt to watch it in April. But yes, there's something wrong with you if you're pulling out Don't Open Till Christmas and watching it on a chilly March afternoon. Um, you could be watching Pieces instead.
yeah, exactly. Because everything. It's kind of its weaknesses are its strengths,
Mhm.
because there's no getting around it's not a very well made film. It's appallingly acted in places. The script is not fantastic. it doesn't really make that much sense. And yet, because it's this tacky film that you can only watch at Christmas, your Christmas brain kicks in. You know, I'm very on some levels, I'm very open-minded to horror and horror adjacent stuff, and I will, I will give more time, and I will try and champion as much of that kind of cult cinema as possible, because I think, lots of people aren't, so it's my job to champion that kind of stuff. So I'm very, but on some levels, I'm incredible. With lots of other films, I'm much more discerning, and I'm much pickier. But at Christmas time, I'm much more tolerant. I will watch any old shit at Christmas time. If it's got Christmas on it, if it's got a piece of
Right.
holly stuck to it, I'll watch it. The shittest sitcom in the world, which I would never watch during the rest of the year. If there's a Christmas special, I'll give it a go.
Hmm.
So this is what this film does. If you stripped away, if this was set during Easter or whatever, if this was set at any other time of the year, you would give this a massive swerve, because it's a terrible film on that level. But
Right.
if you wrap it in a Christmas bow, it kind of and particularly when that bow is very manky, threaded and shitty as it looks, and it's amongst some of the worst Christmas decorations ever applied to a living room, um, and the worst fucking Santas you've ever seen, the most unhealthy, horrible looking, pasty faced, whiskey drenched Santas you've ever seen, then I'm all in. I'm all in.
Right. Five
It's
stars.
fantastic. Yeah. Yeah, why not? I mean, what else are you gonna do? Just this is what it's for. I mean, Black Christmas is almost like the inverse. Black Christmas. I could probably watch Black Christmas in summer. I'm not gonna do, but I'll probably could, because
Right.
it's an unqualified, brilliant, brilliant film. It's it's just incredibly brilliant. I will argue anybody. It's
Mhm.
fantastic, and it's better than
Yeah.
Halloween. Um, but this isn't.
No, no, no.
This,
They are the yin and yang of holiday horror. That's for sure.
but there is, you know, uh, there is much to be enjoyed from this. If only, like I said, it's so um manky. It's manky. It's like the nobody in it seems to understand what's happening. Nobody understands the plot. I doubt if anybody read the script from beginning to end. Um, and it's kind of all the better for that. It's terrible, but it's brilliant at the same time.
Yes, yes, yes. It is enjoyably awful.
I mean, I suppose we should not that to take it down a peg, but it's like, I guess we should talk about Alan Lake. I mean, that is the kind of the tragic sort of footnote to this story in a
Mm.
way. So, Alan Lake, who he plays the killer in the film, he plays the sort of psychopath in the film, Giles.
From the Daily.
Yeah, and um he took his own life, just before the film was released, because he was married to Dinah Dawes,
Mm.
and Dinah Dawes died, and then he, essentially couldn't hack it, and poor man sort of got rid of himself, and it's really tragic. So it kind of reminded me a little bit of George Sanders as well, who he did the last film he did was Psychomania, and then ended up taking his own life. Again, I think that just before that was released as well. Um, so I mean, did were you? I mean, did you know? I don't know how much of an impact someone like Dinah Dawes had in the States. I mean, were you aware of Dinah Dawes?
I mean, I knew the name, but that was really about it. And what I wasn't aware of until this recent viewing of it was apparently the guy who played Cliff also committed suicide. Jerry Sundquist. he threw himself in front of a train
Really?
not too long. Yeah, so I was not aware of that. So
No, I didn't know
kind
that.
of yeah, couple of tragic footnotes to the film.
Yeah. I mean, Dinah Dawes was it's odd because she really not on a sort of huge world stage, but certainly in this country, she kind of got her film career off the ground round about the mid 40s, mid to late 40s. And so she kind of got her cinematic break before Marilyn Monroe. But obviously, Marilyn Monroe, as soon as Marilyn Monroe kind of was, had made it, she became this worldwide smash and she kind of eclipsed everybody and all of those kind of what might have been blonde bombshells before were kind of certainly in her shadow. Even people like Jane Mansfield, they were very much second, third tier in compared to
Right.
Marilyn Monroe. So I think Dinah Dawes kind of became known slightly unfairly. She was became known as kind of the British kind of Marilyn Monroe. And back in the 40s and 50s and 60s, really, she was that kind of British bombshell kind of sex symbol. But then, sort of in she continued her sort of cinematic career, and she kind of put on a little bit of weight, and she became older, and so in the 70s, she ends up popping up in these films like Deep End, and things like From Beyond the Grave, and various, she's in an episode of Hammer House of Horror as well, and she started playing these kind of more sort of character roles and sort of more downbeat characters, rather than the kind of more sort of sensational Hollywood type roles. And so, yeah, and I think, spoke about this before, but she in up until, in the sort of 40s and 50s, it's almost like she became a metaphor for the country in some way because like if you look at she was this bright sex symbol type character in the 40s and 50s, and then by the time you get to the 70s, like the country, it's like things are on the turn a little bit, and she represents something else entirely. So even though she might not be that well known in other countries, she became almost this symbol of what was happening within the country over here. But yeah, it is. I mean, the whole thing. What I mean, Dinah Dawes, she died before she should have died. Really, she was relatively young, and obviously Alan Lake taking his own life. So yeah, as much as we've taken the piss out of the film, there is like this tragic downside to it as well. Um, but yeah, any last thoughts on Don't Open Till Christmas?
I would just, as you say, we've, kind of had some fun with it, but it is a terribly entertaining film. It never bores me, and I would implore anyone who has a taste for Christmas horror films and who hasn't seen it to at least give it a shot.
Yeah, this is quite a good later on sort of last thing before you knock off and go to bed on Christmas Eve. This is a good.
Yep.
Make sure your granny's tucked up in bed. Don't let her watch it. But yeah, um,
Yeah. Right. So like for me, like my Halloween tradition is that like after everyone has left the party and everything's been put away and wind down, I sit on the couch, I crack a beer, and I watch Halloween 3 Season of the Witch. This is kind of my Halloween 3 Season of the Witch for the Christmas season.
yeah, it's yeah, it's as bad as you already think it is, but it's amazing as well. So yeah, just want to say to all that, look, this podcast now has been going a year and a half now. So yeah, this is episode 45. And, yeah, I just want to say thank you to everybody that does tune in and listen and download, and everybody that's subscribed, and all this stuff. I know this is all like the bollocks kind of plug stuff, but I do mean it. If you are listening to this, and we do get people listening from all over the world, and it always amazes me. So I'm really, really grateful to everybody that's listening and everybody that's subscribed and all that, and everybody that's kind of talked about it and messaged me and whatever. So keep listening and keep sending messages and keep subscribing. And I wish you all a Merry Christmas. So it just remains for me to say thanks again to my wonderful guest, Dan Taylor.
I am always happy to be a guest. I love our chats. We've covered a lot of ground in the 3 episodes, and I hope there will be more in the future. And I'm going to send you some pictures from our Dickensian animatronic theme park that we go to on Sunday.
Lovely. Yes. Well, yeah, you'll definitely be back on again. So, yes, thanks, Dan. And remember to call round next time. Make yourself at home. You look like you're dying for a nice cup of tea for terror.
And remember, my friend, future events such as these will affect you in the future.